All right. It's about where we should be. Yeah. Whew. We're good. All right. Donnie, we good? Cool. So, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us here at Google New York as part of our Accessibility Week, Google Worldwide on the live stream and on Josh's YouTube channel, live stream, the cast of millions out there. So I'm really excited to be here. My name is Sasha Blair-Goldensohn. I'm an engineer here at Google New York. I'm here with Josh George, a wheelchair racer extraordinaire and a headliner in our New York Accessibility Week. I want to give you a little idea of the agenda today. We'll start off with a quick video, then I'm going to chat with Josh a little bit about what he's been doing over the years, and then we'll open it up for audience questions and Dory questions at the end too. So that's what we're going to do. And so I'm going to let Katie Couric introduce you a little bit first, and then we'll get to it ourselves. So Donnie, please hit it.
And finally tonight, one of America's top athletes hoping to win big in Beijing as a sprinter and a marathoner. And he is definitely on a roll. Here's Mark Strassman.
Yeah. On Illinois country roads, Josh George grinds out the miles. A whirl of raw power and willpower.
I love to train. I love to train.
From America's premier wheelchair athlete.
Out here, it's eyes on the prize.
Eyes on the prize. Eyes on the prize. There's always that ghost runner that's just out ahead of you.
He fought to the top after a life-changing fall. When he was 4, George tumbled out an apartment window.
You fell how far?
I fell 12 stories.
Landing on his feet, he somehow lived paralyzed from the chest down.
One instant I'm walking on the windowsill, the next instant, I don't know how many days later, I'm laying in a hospital bed with tubes coming out of my body.
He's now 24 and barely 100 pounds. Physically an underdog, even for an elite wheelchair athlete.
But it's all like here to here for you, right? I mean,
It's all here. It's all chest, shoulders, triceps.
There's no abs, there's no legs, no butt. Doesn't get any of that. And a lot of the guys he's competing against can draw on those muscle groups for power.
No one competes with his versatility. Good enough to start for the U.S. national basketball team. 3 world records as a sprinter. And lately, marathons.
3 men in a dead battle.
Chicago, 2 years ago.
Joshua George, exactly. He's from Champaign, Illinois, and he's going to take the title.
Ahead for George, this summer's Beijing Paralympics. He could medal in 6 events. So there's nothing he'd change. Nothing.
given the option to walk your jet, would you do it?
No. No. If some doctor came up with a magic pill and said, hey, if you take this, you'll walk again, no, there's no point.
No point at all, when winning is all he knows. Mark Strassman, CBS News, Champaign, Illinois.
And good luck, George. That is the CBS Evening News. I'm Katie Couric. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you right back here tomorrow. Good night.
Thanks. Pretty amazing. So can you tell us, how did you start your career as a wheelchair racer?
So I was very fortunate. As you saw in the video, I was injured when I was 4, and it was actually my principal of my elementary school who sort of introduced me to wheelchair racing. Her husband was a marathoner, and when they were talking one night after the first week of school, they were talking, my principal told her husband that, hey, I have a student in a wheelchair. And he's like, oh, the last race I did, there were guys in wheelchairs that were there racing. And my principal thought that was the coolest thing and actually made it a point to invite wheelchair racers to come to the school to put on an assembly for the students. And so that way I got to learn about wheelchair racing, and all of my classmates also got to learn about wheelchair racing, which was really cool. And so that was sort of one of the sparks that set me in motion to where I am now.
And where was this? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Northern Virginia. So this was in Herndon, Virginia. Yep.
And where's home for you now?
Home now, as of recently, is actually Sydney, Australia. Just moved this year. I spent the past decade, I guess, living and training in Illinois and jumping out on, when the air started getting too cold for me in Illinois, I would head to Australia and do my winter training in their summertime. And over the years, I just spent more and more time there, and now I live there. So it's a good transition.
Don't mean to embarrass you, but do you have any other reasons for being in Sydney these days?
So it was really my girlfriend that drew me out there.
Right over here in the audience, Madison.
So she's a racer as well. Currently the world champion in the 5,000 meters, and yeah, so she's the main reason, I suppose, that I'm living in Australia.
And what are you guys doing in New York this week?
So we're here in New York because it is Marathon Week. The New York City Marathon's on Sunday. Madison my girlfriend is racing on Sunday. I'm unfortunately not. I'm recovering from an injury, but I've done this race for the past 8 or 9 years, I guess, 8 years, and it's one of my favorite races on the planet. Yeah, it's a good time.
And if anybody gets a chance to be out there alongside the course, do it. It's really fun. I've done it over a bunch of years, and the push rim racers, which is the wheelchair racers, they're the first ones.
Yeah, so if you're gonna,
so they'll be the first people you see go by.
Absolutely. If you're gonna watch it, get out there early, and you'll catch the wheelchair racers coming through, and they're coming through fast. It's a great race.
So thinking about your athletic career, I know it spanned like maybe. So 2003, that was the first marathon that I saw listed that you won.
Yeah, yeah.
So you spanned at least a dozen years, and even before. It sounds like from elementary school. Is there like one or several? What are the big achievements in that career that you'd like to tell us about?
So fortunately, I've had a few highlights along that long career. Katie Couric mentioned in that video that I had a chance to medal in 6 races in Beijing. Well, unfortunately, I only medaled in 2, but I brought them with me. So afterwards, I'll chuck them out into the crowd. You could take a look at them.
If you get a chance, grab them. Hold on.
They're pretty cool.
You got to. They're solid. These are not little bottle caps.
So I've won 5 Paralympic medals. I'm a 6-time world champion. And then the two particular marathons sort of stand out to me. I won the Chicago Marathon in 2014, which was a huge 10-man finish, 10-man sprint finish. And then I won the London Marathon in 2015, and that was, again, it was 7 or 8 people sprinting to the line. So those were huge accomplishments for me. I started my career as a sprinter, but I always looked at the marathon. I always wanted to work up to that distance and be able to compete at that high level. And so those victories for me really stand out. And hopefully I'll be back there at some point in the future.
So speaking of awesome sprint finishes, I think we actually have that London one on video.
Yeah,
so I wanted to roll one more video so we could actually see what it looks like. Let's do it.
So this is, yeah, the ferocity of wheelchair racing.
Van Dijk went out into the lead as they came into the mall, but then went down. Look, there's the fall at the back.
And this is after.
So that's after
26 miles and 300 yards.
Yeah, that's after 26 miles, and you have to sprint your butt off to try to win that race.
That was a terrific race.
And that was London.
That was London in 2015. So that big building that you saw behind the finish line, that's actually Buckingham Palace. So it finishes right on the mall in front of the palace. And wheelchair racing is getting intense. So I don't know if we'll see it tomorrow, but you know, more often than not, the races finish in sprint finishes. So you've just ground out 26 miles, and then you got to dig in and find any last bit of energy you have to sprint to the end, which is, it's crazy, but it's fun.
Can you describe for us, like, what was that feeling like at the end when, after you crossed the line? Like, what was going through your mind?
Oh, well, so what you search for as an athlete are these sort of out-of-body experiences where everything's kind of clicking. You've done the training, and you get to that point where your body just knows what to do, and so your mind sort of checks out. Like during that whole sprint that you just watched, I wasn't really thinking at all. It was probably the clearest my mind has been in my entire life. My body was just moving. I felt my arms moving, but I wasn't really even registering mentally what was going on. And then you cross the line, and I don't think I stopped smiling the rest of the day there. That was amazing. Yeah, I had a perma-grin until I got back to the US.
How did you celebrate?
I think I might have taken a nap. I was tired. I know you finish these races and you're like, oh, it's super exciting. You're going to go out and you're just tired. So I think I might have had a beer and then took a nap. And that was a fantastic celebration.
And I'm going a little back from there. Are there any like rituals, or how do you prepare for the race? Like, or maybe what's Madison going to be doing tomorrow?
So I don't. She's a lot more chill than I am. I'm a little bit of a head case, and my way of handling my head casedness is I don't have any rituals. Because I don't want to worry about anything extra besides the race. I'm already worrying so much about the race that I've felt like for me, if I had a ritual, if I had something I needed to eat, or a certain song I wanted to listen to, or whatever the case may be, if for some reason I got to a race and I couldn't do that thing, I didn't want to be worried about that. So I've actually kept my athletic career ritual-free, and I'm planning on keeping it ritual-free.
Seems to have worked for you.
It's so far so good.
So what next? Are you still racing? What's on the agenda now?
Yeah, so I'm still racing. I'm sort of reaching sort of the middle-ish years of my career. So it's about that time where I'm beginning to think about what's next after racing. You know, I still should theoretically have another 5 to 10 years of a career. But at the same time, I have other interests in life. I studied journalism at the University of Illinois, and I've started doing a little bit more writing recently, and I'd like to get more into that, doing more writing, doing more media creation, just on the video side of things, and I don't know, really exploring some other interests that I have.
So are there going to be more races at all? Or are you?
Oh, absolutely. There's definitely going to be more races.
You're still training.
I'm still training. Like I said, I'm recovering from injury right now, but I'm training. My next major marathon back will be the Tokyo Marathon in February of 2018. So I'm planning on jumping right back into the marathon circuit next year. Just had to take a little bit of time off, as you do once or twice throughout your career. But hopefully be back in full form in February.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
So we were talking a little bit before, and I'm really interested to hear about your, so how you view like the sort of state of accessibility, you know, wheelchair accessibility, but also other kinds in the world. So we were talking about that. I mean, it's Accessibility Week at Google. You know, giant company in the world. There's a lot more awareness now than there used to be, but we got a long way to go.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been in a wheelchair for too long, for 29 years now. And so I've really noticed the differences in the United States from when I was a kid to now. Just, you know, you could almost rate it by the amount of people that stare at me going through an airport. It used to be everyone would stare at me pushing through an airport, especially because I go through with my racing chair. So I have this funky piece of equipment, and I'm pushing through too, and it's just something unusual. And at first, people would stare because it's weird. And now, like last night, I'm coming through LaGuardia, and people are staring because they recognize a racing chair and they know it's marathon week, and everyone's asking, "Hey, you in for the race? You in for the race?" And it's really cool. That's something that never used to happen. You know, the first 5, 6, 7 years that I was a marathoner, you'd show up to a city for a major race, and no one would have any clue that you were actually involved in that competition. And now, thanks to the efforts of the New York City Roadrunners in New York and other race organizations around the world, you know, you show up to New York and they ask you if you're racing. You show up to London during marathon week, everyone's like, "Oh, you're racing, you're gonna, you know, how about that David Weir," who's the guy that I fortunately beat in that video. But, you know, they actually know wheelchair racers by name, and it's pretty cool. But there's, you know, we've come a long ways, but there's still a lot more work to be done, and there's still some issues that I feel like we can iron out.
So as far as the work to be done, then, like, what do you see as, we were talking before, but like, what do you see as the lowest hanging fruit? Like, how can we, like, if there was a message that you could tell people, like, what should people know? Like, I mean, probably a lot of people talk to you, a lot of people have talked to me and said, you know, Sasha, before, so I've been in a chair only 8 years. Right. But I didn't know before, but once you know, it's you live it every day. And people say, well, what could I know? What can I do? What should I do? So what would you want to tell people in the wide world to be focused on, or what would you like to see change?
So I think one of the biggest things that I always try to talk to people about when it comes to accessibility is the difference between accessibility and inclusivity. Just because a building or a structure is accessible, it does not mean that it is inclusive. If you have this beautiful building with this great grand front entrance, but there is a flight of steps to that front entrance, and you say, "Oh, the building's accessible, though you can go around to the back and enter down there, and then go through the kitchen and take the service elevator up," and, you know, yes, technically it's accessible, but it's not inclusive. From the moment you try to enter that building, all of a sudden you're putting people on a separate starting point, a separate platform. And, you know, the United States has a bit of an uncomfortable history with separate but equal, but we as a nation should fully understand that separate but equal is not something that works. There is no equality in that. And so the biggest thing is to think of think of accessibility so much, but think of inclusivity. I'm a big fan of the theory of universal design, where structures and products and things should be designed universally for everyone to be able to use it, no matter what their entry point is in terms of disability, language, whatever the case may be. You know, a great example of universal design, one of my favorites, is the automatic sliding doors. It doesn't matter who you are, whether you're pushing a stroller, pushing a wheelchair, or just walking through, the door opens for you the same way, and you enter the building without even thinking about it. And that's the beauty of a design that is fully inclusive, where it's not even something that you would think about. It just happens, and everyone's starting from an equal point. Everyone feels equally welcomed going into that building with a structure like that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I try to say that to people all the time, and yes, please. Please, I need you by my side to make that point so well.
Yeah, I mean, but it's a hard thing, especially so if you start going back and exploring the reasons why accessibility is the way it is, especially in the United States, the U.S. has a history of working under a medical model for people with disabilities. Disability, just the language around it is straight out of a hospital, really, which is not the nicest language. It's not the best language to use, and it's almost automatically conceived in a negative way, a negative connotation. You know, if you just the wheelchairs that we're sitting in, if you change the way a wheelchair was seen and you start viewing it as a lifestyle product as opposed to a medical product, like that in itself, when you think lifestyle, oh, okay, what does this tool need to do to help me through my life? Whereas when you're thinking from a medical standpoint, you're automatically thinking, okay, what's wrong with that person? So how am I going to design this device to fix what's wrong with that person? So instead of thinking about what's wrong with the person, let's think about what that person needs to be doing. And it starts with the language that you're using when you're approaching the problem.
Words are important.
Words are important, absolutely.
So I have, I think, at least one more question for you here, but then I want to open it up to the audience here and also on the Dory, which is the online question board. So if anybody out there has some questions they're thinking of, you could start adding them to the Dory or voting them up or however that magic happens. So but what I wanted to ask you is, so you're speaking of products and building things. Is there anything that you think people at Googlers should know, like as Word? So as you know, I work on maps, and we've been putting a lot of effort these last few years to try to push maps to let people know, like can I get in the door when I get there? Yep. And then if so, I mean, those are the two questions, right? If I get there, can I get in the door? What's it going to be like? And if so, how do I get there? Transportation. Yeah. So those are the things we've been focused on a lot, and my team has, and I've been trying to push people. But is there something that you'd like to see Google build or technology build?
I think one of the biggest things that Google can do is approach that issue that I just talked about, the issue with language in all the programs that you guys are designing. The software is there, and the information that you're gathering is there, and the power that you have to influence, the power that Google has to influence the way society views these issues is going to be in how it's presented to them. So in really paying attention to the language that's used and how it's presented, and even maybe even moving away from terms like accessible and figuring out different ways that actually describe why it's accessible. Like it's a zero-level entry or something to a building, and so then okay, there's no steps into the building, because accessibility happens on at different levels. Like there's a difference between being able to get into the building and then being able to function in that building, whether there's an accessible restroom or something like that. But Google really has the power to approach that and present that information in the lifestyle model and move disability out of that medical model, because so many people across the globe use those products. So if they're seeing, oh, this is what Google says this is, and it's a positive term, it's a lifestyle term, then they're thinking from that point on, every time they see that using that piece of software or using the hardware that I know Google's getting into now, like that's going to affect their thought process when they actually see a person with a disability. And I think that's one of the biggest things that Google can really help with. That would be incredible.
Yes, it would. Thank you. That sounds good. All right. Hope everybody's listening out there. I'll tell my boss.
Nice.
So I actually think we want to take some audience questions now, or questions from the online question board if we have them. I got some more too. But we have some microphones set up here. Anybody in the audience have a question they'd like to ask for Josh?
Yeah, I do. First of all, thanks for joining. It's really great to hear your story.
Thank you.
So along the lines of the question that Sasha just asked you, I'm curious, what challenges do you find in the community in terms of finding places to go and accessing them, and what could be done to change the physical landscape, and then what could be done from a digital product or app perspective to enable easier discovery and accessibility of local places?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I'm personally, it's also a question I feel a little bit uncomfortable answering, because personally, I have found ways to adapt to certain things. Sasha and I were talking earlier. I have an aunt and uncle from the city, and I actually learned how to climb steps to be able to access their apartment building independently. So I know how to climb up and down flights of stairs as long as they're a handrail. But I understand that's not something that most people in wheelchairs are able to do, and it's not something that should be asked of a person in a wheelchair, to be able to learn how to climb a flight of stairs. It also can be a little dangerous. So, but more to your question. So personally, the things that I have issues with a lot are public transportation. A big thing, especially in New York City, when you have a city this size and everyone here relies on public transportation, I'm sure, to get around throughout the course of your day. And you know, the subway system here is pretty horrible in terms of being accessible. And even the buses, like if I came to the city, whenever I go to a new city, I'm always uncomfortable taking public transport because I don't know what's going to be awaiting me. Like I know, oh, cool, it says, I just looked it up online. It says I could take this bus from point A to point B, but can I actually get on that bus? And I don't have that information until I show up, and I better have plans B, C, and D, because if my bus plan doesn't work, if I can't actually get on that bus, I need to figure out what to do. From structures, it's a similar thing. New York has, since we're here, I'll talk about New York, but New York has gotten a lot better throughout my lifetime, throughout my time in a wheelchair, with being able to get in places. So there aren't too many restaurants or places now that I go to that I can't get in them, but still, like, you always have to plan, oh shoot, how long am I gonna be there? If I'm gonna be there for an extended period of time and I have to use the bathroom, am I actually gonna be able to get to a bathroom? Am I gonna have to run across the street to another place? Am I gonna go down? You know, so you're constantly thinking of what's accessible once you're in that structure. And I feel like just in the same way that data is accumulated to discover what the fastest routes are when you're using Google Maps or accumulating this data for other products that you're doing, if there was a way to accumulate data about some of those different accessibility angles, and you could even have a ranking system. Like there's no reason why every structure is going to be 100% accessible. That's just impossible. It's an unrealistic goal. But if we knew to what level of accessibility a structure was, that can really make planning your day, planning your vacation, taking your kids out to do an activity, that much more stress-free for a person with a disability. Sorry, it was a little bit of a long one.
No, that was great. Thanks. I thought it was really great that you addressed kind of like the local use case, or what happens like when you're in your neighborhood, and when you're kind of in different circumstances and you're traveling.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Good. Thanks, Ben. I want to take some from the Dory board now. So these are Googlers from all over the world, and if I could read a little better, I would say who and where this question was coming from. Yes, Donnie from New York. Donnie from New York. Do you have, I'm sorry, do you or have you ever wanted to play an instrument? And if so, which one?
Oh man, I have, yes, I've wanted to play lots of instruments. And I'm not the most musically inclined. My sister's a singer and she plays the guitar and piano, and I'm really jealous of her skills. But recently, a couple years ago actually, I bought a ukulele. And I've been learning to play an ukulele, and I have a little plastic one that I can travel with, so I bring it to races and stuff, and I'm horrible at it, but it's a lot of fun, and it's a great stress reliever. Yeah.
Awesome. Do you have any concerts on your YouTube channel?
No, and there won't be in the near future either, so don't hold your breath.
And who's this one again? I can't quite see. Jeremy from Salt Lake City. Thank you. Can you talk to us about your average training regimen and how you amp it up before a big race?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm training about 6 days a week, every week, and typically I'll do between 8 and 10 or 11 sessions a week. So that means there's a lot of days in there where I'm going twice a day. And actually, fortunately, you don't have to amp it up before a big race. Big race weeks are the easiest weeks of training because you get to taper down. Your training routines get a little bit easier, your runs get a little bit shorter, and you're really trying to store up that energy for race day. And actually, throughout my career, what's become one of my favorite days of the year are the days right before a marathon, because I'm naturally a lazy person, and the day before a marathon, you have every excuse in the world to do absolutely nothing, and it is fantastic. So you could lay around all day and no one can tell you otherwise. That's great.
what about your training regimen in terms of, do you have like a special diet or anything like that?
I don't really have a special diet. That's one thing that's sort of lagged in my training, but I try to eat just a balanced, relatively healthy diet, but really it's just getting some calories in. You're burning enough calories throughout the day, you got to get them in.
Got a couple, we have another local question here. Sorry, yes, please.
We're talking about racing right now and being an athlete. How much actually does the equipment, like take a part of your race? Like, is it, like, I know your girlfriend Madison talked about she getting like a new chair for racing. It's like,
yep.
What sort of difference is there? Like a race car driver almost.
Oh yeah, I mean, obviously the driver is more important than the equipment. So the athlete's more important than the chair, but the chair still plays a very important role in what you're doing. And the equipment has sort of evolved throughout my career as a racer. I actually just got a brand new chair last week that now has the main tube of the chair is made out of carbon fiber, which is a lot more rigid, so it theoretically rolls better. And so companies now are experimenting with carbon fiber chairs. Either they're doing the whole thing carbon fiber, like Honda, the car company, in Japan, they actually build racing chairs. And those are fully carbon fiber, and they look like frickin' rockets. They're really cool. And then other companies are making sort of this hybrid where part of it is carbon fiber, part of it's aluminum. But it's important to, like, the equipment is very important. You need the thing to roll right and perform right so that every bit of energy you're putting into it, you're getting that speed out of it. And it's not cheap. I guess those chairs, you could get a cheap chair for $4 or $5 grand. But really, like, you're talking, 10 grand plus when you chuck in wheels and all the proper components. And then you have to, if you have an aluminum frame, you have to replace the aluminum frame every year or two because the aluminum weakens over time and it starts flexing. And the last thing you want is a frame that's moving in directions other than forwards. So.
I don't think I have no, I do have another local question right here, please.
So you said that you started off in short sprints and then changed to the marathon.
Yep.
That's kind of insane. So how did you, because those are completely different muscle groups. Like, how did you even do that?
It's a little bit insane, but not as much as you would think in wheelchair racing. So wheelchair racing, the skills and muscle groups that you're using don't vary quite as much between a sprint and a distance race as they do in the running world. There is still obviously a lot of variation, but it's not the same as in running. I equate it a little bit more to swimming, where if you look at Olympic level swimmers, they're able to tackle a bit of a broader range of distances and a different range of strokes. So it's a little bit similar to that. But for me, the transition was, it really occurred when I decided I wanted to be a professional racer. There isn't a lot of exposure for track racing in the United States. And whatever exposure was available was all available for road racing, which is all 10K and longer. And so I knew that if I wanted to maintain a career as a wheelchair racer, I would have to get better at those longer races. And so it was a really calculated decision with my coach, and when I was sitting down and trying to determine what lifestyle I wanted and what I wanted to accomplish. And so it was a tough transition. I talked about earlier, I won the Chicago Marathon in 2014. I started training for marathons as my primary event at the end of 2008. So I won a gold medal in the 100-meter sprint in Beijing, and that was the last time I ran 100 in my life. From that point on, I trained for the distance, and it took, I don't think I won another major marathon until 2014. So it took, what is that, 5-6 years for me to get to the point where I could challenge for a major marathon win. It was not the quickest transition.
Thank you.
Thanks. The question about equipment made me, I actually wanted to ask this before. So like, I think, most people can sort of have some idea what's involved in, running a mile on the track because they're used to running for the bus, but not many people have pushed a wheelchair. Oh, and speaking of which, anybody in New York, and I think other places too, this being Accessibility Week, after TGIF tomorrow, we're going to have a bunch of loaner wheelchairs there. If anybody wants to do a little roll along and practice or just get a sense of it, of what it's like, you can get in a chair and try it out. So I encourage anybody who wants to come to do that.
Definitely give it a try.
Give it a try, because it's actually kind of fun, and it's hard. It's harder than you think, especially going up even a small slope.
Yeah.
Okay, advertisement over. So like, what are the, what's hard about, I mean, obviously it's hard, but what are like the technique things about wheelchair racing that people wouldn't know?
Yeah, so wheelchair racing is one of the most technical sports that you could possibly do. And I think the hardest part with it is that it's completely unnatural. So running, for example, when you're a kid, you just sort of instinctively know how to run, and you might not have the best form, but your form is in the ballpark of good, and then you could work on that to make it better. Whereas wheelchair racing, when you saw in that video what we're doing, it's not natural at all. No one has an innate ability to move their arms in circles really fast. And especially when the rim is spinning that fast. So at the end of the London Marathon, I was probably going 21, 22 miles an hour. So that ring is spinning even faster than that because it's a smaller ring. And you have to be able to hit it properly where you're putting power into the wheel and not actually losing power, taking away or slowing the wheel down. And there's a lot of technique to be able to come on and off the ring. And so as you see, you don't actually grab the ring like you do in a everyday chair. It's sort of, you hit it tangentially. Like if you're spinning a basketball on your finger, to keep it moving, you sort of tap the edge of it. And it's that same type of concept in a racing chair. And so it takes a lot of time and a lot of training to be able to do that and put all the power you possibly can. So think, go back to that basketball thing. Think if you had to wind up and hit that as hard as you can, you're going to hit the basketball off your finger. So it takes a lot of training to be able to put all that power into it without wasting energy.
And do you wear gloves? Do you put pine tar on your hands?
So you do wear gloves. We call them gloves. They don't really look like gloves. They're a hand form that's made out of plastic that is shaped to grab the push ring. So really, I'll have my first two fingers and my thumb kind of covered with this plastic, and my ring finger and my little finger are free to do whatever. And the gloves are designed to catch that ring as it's spinning. So there's a bit of a groove in it, and it catches it while it's spinning. And what's cool about that now is we're 3D printing all of our gloves, which is awesome because you used to have to use this material called aquaplast, which is a plastic material that you heat up in boiling water and then you mold to whatever shape you want. And you cannot build a pair of gloves with aquaplast without burning your hands at least 3 times. And then once you get a shape that you like, it was next to impossible to replicate that shape again. So if you ruined your glove, like say you leave it in your car on a summer day and the sun melts it, which I've done, then you're screwed. And it can take you a while to build something else that works. Where now, I have the file, I push a button, and something prints me a glove. That was great.
And at the end of the race, are your hands like shredded? Are they?
Yeah, yeah. So no matter how much you train, you build calluses on your hands. But for whatever reason, I'll put in 150 miles a week leading up to a race, and that day, I'll have no blisters on my hand to start the day, and I'll have a couple of blisters, or I'll be bleeding from somewhere out of my hand at the end of the race, and it's inevitable. I don't know how it happens, but it's part of racing.
So we have a bunch more of these remote questions. Let's see. So next question, and where is that from? I still can't. Sasha from Chicago. Go Illini.
Oh, yeah.
Go Illini. With so many incredible achievements in your life, is there one which is the most meaningful to you?
Oh, man. That's such a hard question. From an athletic point, it's really my 2 major wins in the past few years, winning Chicago and winning London. Those are pretty remarkable. But just throughout my career, I've really had the most support that I could have asked for. My parents try to come out and watch me race at least once or twice a year. One of the reasons why I love the New York City Marathon is I have a lot of family that live in the city, and so every year when I'm racing, they'll come out and get to watch me race, and I'll get to share what I'm doing with them, and that's phenomenal. And so, you know, it's not one moment, but it's one moment a year, I guess. So every year I get to do that, which is great.
Cool. Next one, again, who is this? Sana Khan from Mountain View. So that's our mothership headquarters in
nice.
California. Which city or course is your favorite race to compete in?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, not that one? Oh, sorry, I skipped one. Sorry. Sana Khan's question is, what's your favorite sports movie?
Oh, man. My favorite sports movie. See, the favorite movie question, you always know it when no one's asking you, and then someone asks you the question, you can never come up with what that movie is. I have no idea. I'm sorry, Sana Khan.
You keep thinking about
I'll
that
think
one.
about that
Then
one.
we'll go with the next one, which is Alejandro from Miami. Which city or course is your favorite race to compete in, and why?
So I guess as I just talked about, New York is my favorite race of the year, but it is a miserable race. It's so hard. It is the hardest course that we do on the circuit. So probably my favorite course, this is probably one of my favorite courses, even though it's miserable, but I love London. I love the London Marathon, and I love the Chicago Marathon. Chicago was pretty much home for a long period of time, and so that was always a good one to get out to.
Do those crowds have personalities? Like the London crowd, do they hand you beer on the course? Chicago.
all the crowds have personalities. I think London as a city, they have the most people that come out early to see us go, because in a lot of cities they're so shocked by how quickly the wheelchair racers come through that the crowd isn't as big for us as it is for the runners. But that's changing now in all of the spectator guides. So in Chicago, just a month ago, in their spectator guide, they actually had expected times for the lead wheelchair racers written in their guide so that you knew, oh, I could come out early and see these guys race. And I'm sure New York does the same thing. All the major marathons in the world are starting to do the same thing, which is really cool. Yeah.
Another local question. Steve.
Hey.
That's all right, I could hear you.
I think I can.
Steve from the Maps team.
Hey. Well, all right. Well, just piggybacking off that question, you've had a chance to travel all around the world, competing and speaking, and I was wondering if there were any ways in which cities or societies have stood out, either for the sort of inclusivity of their built environment and transportation, or just being inclusive in other ways.
Yep.
And to the extent, like, what do you think causes differences in how people build their cities or their countries and people that get around differently?
So that's a great question, and one that I'm trying to find the answer to. That last part of the question, I don't know what fuels the way it's designed, but it's really interesting when you travel around, especially now that I've lived in two different places, and I have this conversation with Madison and some of my other friends in Australia. Like it's interesting. In Australia, their legal system isn't as great for people with disabilities. Or in the U.S., the Americans with Disabilities Act from '92 was huge. It was a huge step in just putting laws around basic accessibility for people with disabilities, and that was incredible. However, even though they don't have that in Australia, culturally they're far more advanced than we are in the U.S. in terms of dealing with people with disabilities. And these are, again, general statements. There are places in the U.S. that are fantastic as well, but as a whole, Australia seems to do it a little bit better. And I feel like it's because they, just from a culture, they see the person first and then the disability second, whereas in the United States, again, generally, we tend to see the disability first and then the person comes much later, and that flavors how that interaction begins. And so even though you might show up to a structure in Sydney where I live and it's not accessible, the people are easily like, oh yeah, no problem, we'll figure this out and make it happen. Whereas you show up someplace that's inaccessible in the U.S., one, people are worried about helping or doing anything for litigative reasons, and they're looking at the disability first, and they're like, oh, sorry, we can't help you here. And it's interesting. Like I've traveled around South America. I've done some races in Colombia and in Brazil, and those two nations are not accessible at all. But the culture of the people there, like in Colombia, I don't think I went anywhere that was accessible for the entire week I was there, but I never felt like I couldn't do anything because everyone that was there or working there, they just, without a thought and without any judgment, would swoop in, help you do whatever you needed to do, make you feel wanted, accepted, included, even though the structure itself wasn't accessible. And that's more of a cultural thing. And I think that stems from, again, seeing the person first and not the disability.
We were just talking about this before we came up here, and it's true. The national culture, it makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. But there's not, like I said, too, the U.S. is getting better. It is getting better along those lines. And culture, at least, is something that, it's cheaper to change, I suppose. You don't have to put millions of dollars into infrastructure. But it's sometimes harder to change as well.
It's not about money. It's about attitude.
Attitude, yeah.
And as I'm always saying to people, it's visibility.
Yep.
It's the more the people see it and realize like we're not so different.
Yep.
It makes all the difference. Yeah. So I think we have time for a couple more questions.
One more local, if you want to.
Oh, one more local. Sorry, please. Yes.
Hi. Thank you. So all very interesting. Actually, when you're talking about the difference between culture and legislation, it just sort of raises the question about to what extent, when there are legislative things in place, do people feel as though the government is already taking care of it and I don't have to? And so the cultural differences might actually be a consequence of the fact that they don't have.
That's a very good point.
That's just, I think. Also, are you familiar, Dean Kamen, the Uber inventor, has a wheelchair that ostensibly goes upstairs.
Yeah, I've seen videos, yeah.
Yeah, do you see this as part of your near future? Is this actually going to be something that's pervasive and will change the lives of people in chairs?
So all of those devices, in my opinion, they're all really cool, but the issue is always they were designed to do that one thing really well, and there's a lot of other things that happen throughout the course of your day that it might be clunkier with, and so while having a chair that could get me up a flight of stairs would be awesome, having this chair that I'm sitting in, which weighs roughly 10 pounds with the wheels on, super mobile, super lightweight. I could hop in and out of my car and chuck it in without, worrying about shoulder issues. That becomes more important. So maybe I'll avoid that staircase or two that I might run into, and the trade-off being a chair that's better for everything else. So I think a lot of that stuff, the technology is really cool, but again, with those and with like exoskeletons and the tech is really, really cool. And it's amazing that people are smart enough to make things that do that. But it's approaching the situation from what's wrong with this person, how do we fix what's wrong with this person, as opposed to what does this person want to be able to do that will make their lives better. Like just the pure fact of walking doesn't really make your life any better than my life. What in certain situations might make it better is that walking allows you access to all these other structures far more easily than if you have some sort of physical disability. And so I feel like there are different ways that can approach that from different angles. I mean, it's all, again, it's really cool tech, and it's cool that people are investing the money in it, but I do feel like there's a little bit of a disconnect between the problem that or the way they're approaching the problem. Yeah.
Thanks, Josh. We should record this and put it out there for people to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great idea.
Oh, yeah. I think we are. All right, I think we're actually running to the end of our time, so I think I would just like to thank you for being here. It's such a pleasure to get to hang out with you here, and yeah.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
And I do have the medals, so.
Oh, and we have the medals here. So
for those local, I'll be over there.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool.